Uh, Need a motion to approve our January 14th work session minutes.
So moved.
Motion.
We've got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Minutes are passed. All right, Freddie, can you let the members of the Citizens Finance Committee into the meeting now, please? Hello, Barb. Hello, Kelly.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I see Larry. Larry's getting on now too. Hello, Larry.
There's Al.
All right.
You're muted, Larry.
I'll wait for Al to get on. There's Al. Hello, Al. You can unmute if you want. All right. Well, thank you all. This is our annual report from our Citizens Finance Committee. As everyone knows, a lot of work goes into this in a short period of time. A lot of early meetings, and we appreciate all the work that the Finance Committee does and Sandy and the entire staff in helping out. So what we'll do is we all received a copy of their memorandum of recommendations, and I assume Barb, as the chair, will present it to the council.
Yes, but if I need help, I have some willing and able assistants here.
Yeah, so I see, Kelly Mulholland, who's the co-chair,
Yes.
and then longtime member Larry Watson, and one of our new members this year, Al Reinecker, are also present. So Barb, why don't you go ahead and go through it? And I'm going to ask council to just hold questions until Barb is completed, or the committee's completed with making their report, and we can come back to any questions council has.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, council, for the opportunity to serve on the CFC and to present this to you this evening. I want to thank my fellow CFC members. You've already seen Kelly and Larry and Al, and in addition to them, we have Gil Kleineck, Matt Beery, Hunter Martinier, and Jim Morey. So they've been great. And also I'd like to thank Sandy Stevens, the city's finance director, who without whom we could not have done this. And also Sandy's assistant finance director, Jennifer Forgy, who pinch hit for Sandy on a few occasions. We also really appreciate the department heads who met with us sometimes more than once, and also took all of our follow-up telephone calls. Being remote or socially distanced really complicated all those meetings this year, but you all are used to that at this point. Departments we met with include engineering, planning, and streets, primarily focusing on streets, the enterprise funds of water, sanitation, and electric, recreation, police, fire, and administration. Our review focused on fund balances and revenue sources, both of which have been affected by the downturn from COVID, and of course on expenses. When the COVID pandemic became widespread in March and many businesses were forced to shut down, the city responded promptly, and city leadership identified budget reductions and capital project deferrals, which could be implemented without affecting critical services. Expense reductions, including hiring freezes, furloughs, and suspension of deferred comp match, totaled $2.8 million. That included the capital expenditure deferrals. And they did all of this while with no deletion or downturn in city services, and also while providing a safe work environment for all of the employees. The FY22 budget is conservative, but does assume somewhat of a return to a more normal environment. New initiatives are mainly those that have been deferred from the current year. And general fund expenditures are pretty much in line with the current year budget, but of course will be more than that when they actually come through because of the spending curtailment this year. One of the concerns that CFC has, and in fact the major concern, is the city's aging infrastructure and the financial implications of that. Of course, streets are the #1 concern, and this is recognized in that street replacement was not deferred this year when all the other capital projects were, and also 80% of the budgeted FY22 capital expenditures are for streets. But streets are not the only aging infrastructure, although they receive the lion's share of the funding. Water and the recreation department's aquatic and ice centers are also in need of capital for improvements. And the fees that they charge do not cover their total needs. A project that dropped off the capital project list that we were somewhat concerned about is the ERP system. We hope at some point that this can be reinstated, as operational initiatives in some departments depend on or could be assisted with a new system. Funding for streets and other capital needs is a priority. And while the 5% dividend transfer from the enterprise departments, electric, water, and sanitation, assists with this, it is not sufficient. We'll talk about those a little bit more depth when we get into the departments. A little less than half of the city's revenue comes from the enterprise operations of electric, water, and sanitation. The remaining 33 million revenue sources are considered governmental funds, of which approximately 24 million flows through the general fund. Of this, sales and use taxes are about 60%, followed by service fees and property taxes. While sales taxes understandably have been affected somewhat by the pandemic, particularly our share of the county's Prop P tax, as well as the ongoing telecommunications, gross receipts tax, and cable franchise fees, the shortfalls in those. But it's really been the largest hit to revenues versus last year through the third quarter have been charges for services, particularly in the area of recreation. The ice rink and pool, as you well know, were closed for a period of time, and recreation programs, some recreation programs in the day camps, never opened. And on top of that, we had reduced ambulance revenues. With regard to service fees, CFC hopes that in addition to operations returning to normal, we support a review of our current service fee levels for a possible opportunity for increasing them, provided they're competitive with like services in our area. Opportunities might exist with non-transport ambulance fees, dynamic pricing for the ice rink fees, performing arts center non-ticket opportunities, and there are probably other areas too. The city continues to do a great job securing infrastructure and public safety grants, and we support the continued monitoring of all available grants to share in the costs of infrastructure costs and the support of public safety. A source of new revenue is coming from expanding city service to other municipalities. The city has done a great job in expanding our services for a fee to other municipalities for police and fire protection, dispatch services, fleet services, finance services, and recreation facilities. With the addition of Glendale for police dispatch and EMS service, the city is getting economies of scale with a third dispatching unit. The CFC recommends continuing this initiative of exploring long-term contracts with surrounding communities provided those contracts reflect the value of services provided while maintaining the same or better service levels for the city of Kirkwood. The city's management of fund balances enables it to mitigate risks from declining revenues and to maintain strong bond ratings, which keep interest costs low. The city's guideline for the general fund cash balance is 30 to 50% of operating revenue. And I was pleased to see in the financial report through the third quarter, which we recently received, that this cash fund balance was at 34%, which is within the guidelines. So the city is doing a good job of keeping expenditures low with the reduction in revenues, thus not affecting the fund balances to the extent that they otherwise could be. The fund balance for police and fire pension plan continues to be a concern, as expenditures exceed the property taxes collected for the fund. Amounts not covered by the property tax collections have been supplemented annually by the general fund from the fire prevention sales tax and from Prop P, our portion of Prop P. The property tax for police and fire property tax pension fund has held at the current rate since 1996. Council was able to reverse the voluntary reduction in this property tax, which did contribute approximately $200,000 to the fund. So the CFC supports the city's continued monitoring of the police and fire pension plan and supports, in addition to the property tax at some point in the future, that would need, of course, need to be approved by voters in order to get this fund balance back in line. Moving on to some of the departments, engineering, planning, and streets. As you know, the condition of streets continues to be a high priority for citizens. We have made progress and we're in the final year of the five-year plan with a new plan beginning next year. Added funds are needed to expedite street replacement and maintenance, as the current $1.8 million a year in spending is not adequate. The city continues to benefit from federal and state grants for infrastructure projects, including streets, as stated in the revenue discussion. But the city needs a new stream of cash flow for street improvements. We cannot continue to rely solely on the annual transfers to the general fund and to the capital fund, funded by the 5% dividend from electric, water, and sanitation. Two potential options for the city to consider include general obligation debt or the possible creation of a transportation department district, TDD. There's a lot of work that goes into both options, and both would require voter approval. The first option is that the city could issue general obligation bonds for the amount needed to repair the streets. This would be a large debt issuance, but it does have some drawdowns. It requires voter approval, and it would probably be paid back by a tax revenue pledged by the city, most likely from a property tax increase. A transportation department district, or TDD, may impose a sales tax on all retail sales and goods that are made within the TDD itself. So it wouldn't necessarily be citywide, but within that TDD. Those sales taxes collected for the TDD would go strictly for road improvements in Kirkwood. So our recommendation here would be that the city explore the option of creating a TDD to see if the potential impact would be better than issuing traditional general obligation debt. We also think with many of these areas that the upcoming Kirkwood Community Survey questions should consider a question regarding citizen satisfaction with street infrastructure. Moving on to water. A few years ago, the city established a goal to replace 1% of water mains annually. That's 7,128 linear feet of main. While the city did get close to that goal in the mid 80% in FY18 and FY19, the replacements in FY20 were 0.59%, and they're budgeted to be only 0.5% for FY21 and FY22. Now, while these budgeted replacement percentages are in line with the 0.5% national average, the CFC recommends that the city strive to work toward funding the 1% replacement goal in future budgets. The water department, as with the other enterprise fund, transfers annually to the general fund or the capital fund about $700,000, and this is used primarily for street replacements. But the city is trading off water infrastructure for street replacements, and so if funding streets could find a different solution, the current transfer could instead be used to help the water department get closer to the goal for replacing the aging infrastructure. Unaccounted water has averaged 22 to 23% over the past 3 years, while the annual cost to the city of lost water, which is approximately $250,000, is less than finding and repairing leaks. The industry average and the Department of Natural Resources recommendation is 10% for unaccounted water. Leak sensor technology now exists, according to Bill Bensing, that could help to identify leaks. Currently, the city relies mainly on residents to see and report leaks, but many don't reach the surface and are not reported in a timely manner. The cost to purchase this technology is approximately $300,000. So we recommend that the city evaluate the cost versus benefit of purchasing leak detection technology. We should determine how much the city could save in annual unaccounted water costs, and therefore how long it would take to recoup the cost of the software. And then this is a crazy option, but throw it out there anyway. Feasibility of selling the water operation. The water operation requires significant capital and ongoing budgetary funding. Considering other needs, there are not sufficient resources to get the city where it should be in terms of keeping up with capital and operating requirements. So we thought that a possibility would be to consider the feasibility of selling the water department. It was a completely different situation, but the city of Eureka did recently sell their water operation to Missouri American Water. So it has been done in the past. The city did evaluate the option of selling the water operation to Missouri American in 2000, but instead opted to purchase water from Missouri American and continue the distribution of the water in-house. As it's been 21 years since this study, another look at the feasibility of a sale might be warranted. A significant infusion of capital from the sale of assets and future operating revenue might be the answer to our street situation. And unlike sanitation, where we have talked about outsourcing in the past, there the citizens recognize and like the services that they receive from the dedicated department. But with water, it shouldn't make a difference if the water is coming out of pipes that come from Kirkwood or from Missouri American, so long as the price is competitive and the service is comparable. Sanitation. We now pay more for recycling than for trash sent to the landfill, as you well know. This year, in order to respond to the steep increase in recycling costs and additional capital purchases, mainly sanitation trucks, the Kirkwood City Council determined to continue in-house sanitation services and adopted an approximate 30% rate increase plus future annual CPI adjustments commencing in October of last year. The rate increase included increased fees for curbside service, yard waste bags, and special pickups. With this rate increase, the financial position of the sanitation department now has stabilized for the foreseeable future, and the sanitation department has commenced funding an annual transfer of $200,000 for non-sanitation needs. The sanitation department also increased emphasis on education of citizens including a grant-funded initiative with mailings to all residents and new online materials. This increased educational emphasis appears to have resulted in improved quality and reduced volume of recycled materials, thus reducing costs. Educational efforts and resultant cost savings are expected to continue in the future. So we recommend that the sanitation department continue to monitor cost creep to try to minimize the need for future rate increases and continue to assess the impact of the annual transfer on the need to increase rates. Also, they should consider including in the Kirkwood Community Survey questions regarding citizen preferences for in-house sanitation services versus contracting out these services at a potential savings, and for continued operation of the recycling depository. We also recommend that sanitation continue to engage in robust educational efforts around recycling in order to improve the quality of materials being recycled. Sanitation also should continue to seek grants in this area as they are available. We think that that sanitation should engage in a review of legal requirements regarding recycling. We would like to know how much flexibility the city has in the future to restructure its waste collection program. An example of this would be, would we be able to drop a material from the recycled items list, for example, glass, something that might be costing us more than other recycled materials. And sanitation should continue to explore innovative approaches to waste collection to reduce the recycling shortfall within legal limits. For example, we've heard that there may be developments with a possible waste to energy facility being considered in the St. Louis area in the future. In regard to operational efficiencies, sanitation continues to seek increased efficiencies. The adoption of the rolling cart system last year was anticipated to reduce capital expenditures, labor costs, and workers' comp claims. To date, those reductions are in the process of being assessed, although it appears that they are less than anticipated. Other capital investments are being considered to increase in efficiency, including the use of GPS and route optimization. So we think that sanitation should continue to monitor and quantify the anticipated efficiencies from the rolling cart system, and also work toward a goal of route optimization, including the possible adoption of a GPS system, assuming such measures will result in cost-saving efficiency gains. Recreation. While the ice rink revenues are down this year, over the last 5 years, the Kirkwood ice rink consistently generated revenue well above its operational expenses, despite substantial changes to ice availability in the region during that time. Through both ice time shortages and surpluses, the ice rink's revenue has remained consistently around 145% of its expenses. This suggests that the current ice rental rate may be set below the current market price, and rink utilization may not be efficiently distributed to Kirkwood citizens. After a cursory review of several ice rinks in the region, we discovered that the ice rink's rental rate is approximately 25 to 35% below the standard rental price for an hour sheet of ice. Although this rental rate probably assures the full utilization of our facility, it also attracts rental interest from beyond the metro area and may preclude residents or neighboring municipalities from full access. So the CFC recommends exploring a rental rate increase for the ice rink to bring it closer to the market rate in the region. The increased revenue could be utilized for capital projects within the department. And we also recommend exploring a dynamic pricing model for ice rink rental rates to assure the value of specific rental times are priced at the current market rate. This would encourage a more equitable distribution of ice rink expenses by placing a higher expense on those who utilize the facility during prime hours. So similar to other facilities under the Recreation Department's purview, the Aquatic Center experienced a month-long closure due to COVID during the summer months. And when they reopened, it was on a somewhat limited basis. This resulted in a significant loss of revenue, but did allow the department to complete many of its planned capital projects. Nonetheless, the Aquatic Center remains the primary source of capital costs for the Recreation Department as it seeks to repair and restore the 20-year-old facility. The CFC continues to support the Recreation Department's use of the St. Louis County Municipal Parks and Recreation Grant for the pool's infrastructure improvements. And we encourage the plan to increase admission rates and memberships at the Aquatic Center. The Performing Arts Center, although it is currently operational, capacity is severely limited due to the pandemic, and thus revenue is not covering the operational expenses. This budgetary shortfall is exacerbated by the debt repayment of $1.3 million annually. Despite substantial cuts in operational expenses during this current year, including furloughs of salaried employees, removal of part-time employees, and a major reduction in the goods and services utilized, the Recreation Department still expects about a $700,000 deficit at the end of this year. If realized, this deficit will deplete Recreation's capital fund balance down to about $3 million. And if there are continued revenue challenges as a result of capacity restrictions around COVID in the upcoming fiscal year, then the debt repayment will further reduce the balance. This could severely restrict future capital projects at the Aquatic Center and the ice rink, which utilize this fund balance for capital expenses. The CFC recommends closely monitoring the capital balance along with projected revenue and expenses for the Recreation Department throughout the fiscal year. We also continue to encourage exploration of partnerships and collaborations with public and private organizations, as well as surrounding communities, to develop different revenue streams for the Performing Arts Center. And although we originally supported the city's plan for the Performing Arts Center to be self-sustaining within its first 2 years of operation, which would have been fiscal -- the events and circumstances surrounding COVID have severely constrained that objective. As such, we extend the timeline in order to account for the challenges of the previous year, and now recommend self-sustainability of the Performing Arts Center by fiscal year 2024. The Electric Department has suspended a large part of their infrastructure modernization. Past heavy capital investment in the Electric Department infrastructure efforts will increase operational efficiencies. These include upgrades to the Alfred, Leffingwell, and Essex Van Buren substation, plus circuits to improve automation and improvement of efficiency of delivering consistent electric service to our citizens. The last 11 circuits service extensions and LED street lighting planned for FY21 have been deferred to next year. Other projects placed on hold include vehicle replacement, the ERP, which is citywide, and the work order system. Because circuit projects and LED lighting have good cost savings attached to them, the CFC recommends moving forward with these projects as soon as city COVID spending restrictions are lifted. The CFC recommends evaluation of near-term financial impact of the delayed capital investment and recommends quantifying the savings gained after completion of efficiency projects to be clearly reflected in the budget going forward. We also recommend ongoing feasibility analysis of longer-term modernization efficiency projects, including the work order system, the Leffingwell storage, energy storage, expansion of charging stations, and the Sugar Creek substation upgrade, which has been placed on hold indefinitely. The electric department, while it does a great job in managing its finances, its cash balance at the end of the current fiscal first quarter was an historical low of 6.6 million, representing a 14% decline from the end of fiscal 20 and a 27% decline from FY19. Electric has continued to invest aggressively in system upgrades, and they pay for these with cash, especially the past few years, but they've done this at the expense of their cash fund balance. They anticipate no further declines in the cash balance due to the reduced planned capital investments once the system-wide circuit upgrades are completed. And they have and the change in purchase and the favorable purchase power costs will hopefully take place in 2024 following introduction of wind energy to supply 25% of electric consumption. The cash balance is anticipated to grow to 7.7 million at the end of the current year and 7.9 million in FY22. The CFC recommends the electric department continue to closely monitor the net cash position and improve the cash position above the current cash level by ongoing operating efficiencies and winding down of large capital modernization projects. The pandemic impact on Kirkwood school and business utilization of electricity continues to place pressure on electric department revenues. The decrease in school and business utilization have not been offset by a reduction in, I'm sorry, I lost my place. The decrease in school and business utilization have not been offset by increases in residential utilization. Through August, the electric department experienced a 3.3% reduction in revenue, but that's been more than offset by an 8.7% reduction in purchase power expense due to load reductions in schools and businesses. Purchase power is more than 70% of the electric department's budget annually. The purchased power portfolio continues to be well managed. Purchase power is expected to be stable and will be significantly reduced in future years with access to renewable energy, specifically the wind power that I mentioned, provided positive legislation continues. The electric department is currently focused on keeping consistent power for residents, businesses, and schools. All other activities have been placed on hold, including streetlight repairs and tree trimming. Contract labor, the lower cost contract labor, has been eliminated right now for safety, and existing labor is operating in rotations for the same reason. Electric is doing a great job, and the CFC recommends they continue to stay on top of system demands to minimize potential excess purchases, and also continue monitoring of contracts as well as the power portfolio mix, including the legislation to take advantage of increased use of wind power in 2024. CFC also recommends analyzing the ongoing impact of the delayed tree trimming with costs associated with potential future downlines from adverse weather conditions. The electric department does not expect to seek a rate increase in the near future. Currently, Kirkwood Electric charges in the winter months are higher than Ameren's rates, but lower in the summer. Time of use billing when implemented is expected to be revenue neutral, requiring billing software which has been delayed due to COVID. The CFC supports maintaining the current rates for Kirkwood Electric as long as Ameren rates are more competitive. If Ameren is allowed to increase rates an anticipated 2.5% a year, the Kirkwood Electric Department should consider increasing rates to expedite the remaining efficiency modernization project and to accelerate building the cash balance. The CFC supports the efforts following the pandemic to educate the community about the impact of time of use on rates and explore the adoption of time of use rates in the future. Okay, the police department. In last year's report, the CFC supported the addition of a civilian part-time accreditation manager. Due to COVID, the position was not filled, but the position remains in the budget for the current year and for next year, and we continue to support it. Last year's CFC report included a recommendation that the code enforcement staff be transferred back to the newly organized Planning and Building Department. The CFC continues to recommend this transfer, as we think that the code enforcement unit is an important aspect of a complete planning and building function. The 2018 Kirkwood Community Survey asked about the opinion of public safety services. The police department received a low rating in the area of visibility of police. So the proposed FY22 budget includes comments that the police department concurs that police visibility in Kirkwood is a valid concern and requires improvement. The department says that it has sufficient staffing levels in order to allow officers to increase visible patrols. So the CFC supports this proposed effort to improve police visibility using available assets. Some options would be marked police vehicles parked during business hours in the city center, as well as Kirkwood Commons. Senior patrol in highly visible but safe locations. Patrol officers might conduct report writing and perform other administrative duties while in their cars. The next community survey might include a set of questions that would specifically measure the success of this effort to improve visibility in the neighborhoods and retail areas. The community service officer has been providing the community with valuable notifications and updates about the activity of the police department, specifically through the use of social media. Although this CSO performs many activities that inform the community, there are no performance data available to evaluate the cost-benefit aspects of this program. The current community camera program, including doorbell cameras, has become an investigative aid in assisting detectives and officers in solving crimes and assisting with calls for service. So the CFC recommends that the CSO should consider maintaining and reporting periodically the tasks performed to evaluate the cost benefit of the various programs. And also we recommend that expansion of the business video program might be considered, including doorbell cameras. The police department could seek grants or use funds from Prop P to assist with the purchase and installation, specifically in high incident or strategic areas. Both the Kirkwood Police Department and the Fire Department Kirkwood Police Department and the Fire Department have are supporting contracts in increased municipal service contracts, specifically a contract with the City of Glendale and the City of Warson Woods were recently negotiated to provide dispatch services for police and fire-related calls for service. The police department would like to understand the financials surrounding these recent initiatives. And so we thought that possibly in the next negotiation of any of these types of contracts, that the appropriate department or staff person could brief us as well as the department about the methodology and formula used to negotiate these service contracts with other municipalities. And we also would think that the appropriate department head, as well as the director of finance, be part of these service contracting negotiating in the future. During the review of the police budget, the CFC noted that personnel costs for a police officer position, of course, are higher than a staff position. Currently, the police department has a lieutenant assigned to manage the communications and record unit. The unit consists of only civilian personnel, so we thought it might be more appropriate for department to consider doing a cost benefit analysis to determine the feasibility of restructuring this position. And they may want to consider utilizing a personnel consultant to examine other officer positions within the department to determine if those positions could be performed effectively by a qualified civilian, which would be much less expensive. In the police department, as in all the other departments, there are contractual services and interdepartmental charges. In the police department, these are approximately 1.2 million or 12.6% of their proposed budget. Questions concerning these budget categories were referred to the finance department and the police department, and those reviewing the police department would like a better understanding of what is included in those line items. And so it's recommended that the departments have a full understanding of the various costs, including in contractual services and interdepartmental charges, when they prepare their next year's budget. This may or may not allow for reduction of some costs. Our January report to City Council included, last year January, included a recommendation that the Kirkwood Police Department implement performance-based budgeting. This did not happen in the current budget, primarily because of COVID, but we recommend that the police department begin implementation of this when preparing their next budget. Fire department, we're almost to the end here. The title is, this is not financial, but the title assigned to the Kirkwood Fire Department does not reflect the services provided to the community. And so our recommendation is supporting a change that the fire department would like to make, changing its name to Kirkwood Fire and Rescue. The fire department actually has the fundamentals in place to implement performance-based budgeting. And so they have identified the appropriate cost centers. And we think that they should adopt performance-based budgeting for the next year round of budgets. This would require some education, but we think that they're in a good place to get started on it. False alarms and false calls for services represent approximately 8% of the fire department's workload and continue to be a serious concern for staff and firefighters. During the time that the fire apparatus is responding to a false alarm, those personnel are not available to respond to a valid call for emergency services. So the CFC supports adopting a city ordinance governing false alarm, false calls for fire or rescue, including the examination of how other municipalities are managing false alarms. For example, we could send a letter could be sent to the resident for the first false alarm or false call, and then for the second false alarm, a service fee could be charged. Emergency service fees. Rescue and emergency medical service calls represent 65% of the annual fire department workload, although a third of these calls do not require transportation to the hospital or the person declines transportation. In these cases, the ambulance fee is not received by the city as revenue in support of the service. If the city adopted a service fee on ambulance non-transport, let's say a $150 service fee, then $150,000 could be available to offset fire department costs of providing this service. So we support the adoption of an ambulance service fee for emergency calls within a contract municipality, not our city, when a person declines transportation, even though it's recommended by the EMS technician or first aid is administered by the EMS. Ladder tower, the ladder tower 1535 replacement is not included in the the longer term capital budget. But the city fleet department, the fire department believes that this is something that should be looked at. The chief recommends replacement in fiscal year 2026 when the fire truck will be 15 years old, and feels that a delay beyond this date would significantly increase the maintenance costs and decrease resale value. The analysis that's done by the fleet department would say that the truck should be replaced at least by that date. So we support beginning to investigate and identify the options to replace this ladder tower. And performance data, the fire department does not specifically collect and report data or the costs associated with responding to calls for fire or EMS emergency ambulance within the 3 contracted municipalities. It would be beneficial to know data about these, including the number of calls, time out of service, and type of fire, and the number of hospital transports versus non-transports. So we would support the collection of performance data within those contracted municipalities to better understand the cost versus workload relationship, as well as the methodology used to determine costs for future or renewed service contracts. Finally, administration. In the current year, faced with health insurance premiums that were scheduled to go up quite a bit, the city conducted an eligibility audit of the health insurance program. And based on the results of that audit, necessary cost saving measures were adopted, including adjustments to the cost of plan offerings and the elimination of coverage for spouses who have available coverage at their own employers. Also, in the effort to control costs, the city continues to offer a robust wellness program for employees through BJC, and that has strong employee participation. In light of the goal of minimizing employee premiums, the CFC agrees with the city's continued close monitoring of the utilization and costs of various plan offerings and its reductions in covered insureds. And we also agree with the city's continued approach to improving the health and well-being of city employees. Workers' comp expenses are primarily associated with severity of injury, not the frequency of injury. And we have to say that workers' comp claims have shown considerable improvement in the past couple of years. Fewer claims have been made and costs have been below expectations. So continued emphasis on education and training in this area is recommended. And due to COVID, adjustments to the pay ranges that were scheduled and budgeted for January for this month have been deferred. And the deferred compensation match was also suspended in April, but will resume this month. The city is meeting with a compensation consultant to discuss pay ranges and cost of living compared to those of comparable cities. Maintaining regular salary increases is important for the city to be competitive in the marketplace for hiring. So this is just a situation that needs to continue to be monitored to make sure that we are paying employees fairly and that we can react to further adjustments should circumstances warrant them. So we have recommendations throughout this document for potentially addressing various funding shortfalls. You know, we talked about debt issuance. We talk about outsourcing, particularly in the area of sanitation. And we even brought up the sale of the possible sale of assets and future cash flows. We feel that ongoing cost benefit analysis should continue in evaluating all of these recommendations, not just the ones for addressing funding shortfalls. Some of these, of course, are too aggressive or lack feasibility, but a holistic analysis could be beneficial. Finally, as I said earlier, this budget is more conservative than budgets of prior years, but it provides funding for essential services as well as some initiatives deferred from the current year. Due to the downturn and retrenchment caused by COVID, the current year's budget was somewhat irrelevant for purposes of comparison, making some of the areas difficult to evaluate. However, we think the budget is realistic and we're comfortable with it, knowing that the city will ramp up expenditures and funding for capital projects and ramp up expenditures as well as funding for capital projects only when the resources are available to do so. So we appreciate your consideration of our recommendations. We're happy to answer questions. And we also welcome the opportunity to discuss responses to our recommendations with the mayor and senior and city administrative leadership later this spring.
Well, thank you, Barb. I've been through a lot of these, and this was, I didn't compare it, but it's very detailed. You can just tell the work that, you know, the entire finance committee did, and it's greatly appreciated. And there's no idea that's, I forget what word you use, not feasible or something. I mean, it's just, you know, we're all citizens first, and so any ideas that we can have, share, and I mean, crazy ideas sometimes become reality. So I just really appreciate that. The council starts its budget process next Thursday when at 4:30 p.m. Russ makes his annual budget presentation to the council. All are welcome to participate and watch it. And what I might also do, just out of the sake of time, I can't remember if I did it last year, 2 years ago. I don't know if you're available, Barb. Would you be available to sit in for a few minutes on that meeting? And so council, I don't want to start council questions and just get through a few of them tonight. I'm wondering if you or any member of the commission could do that.
Probably, just a minute.
Yeah, just for a few minutes in case council.
At 4:30?
Yes, on the 28th. Okay. Just for a few minutes, so because we won't get to really questions tonight from the council.
Yeah, I could, yes, for a little bit, yeah.
Good, good, thank you, thank you.
Larry and Kelly, are you available?
Sure.
But we can decide later about that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. One thing I will also note, you mentioned services to other municipalities. I don't know if you've seen the agenda tonight. We have a resolution. We are now taking on DePaire's police dispatching in addition to their fire EMS. So we'll be considering that resolution tonight. So I think other than some thanks, I think what I want to do is wait until next Thursday, and we'll start that off with council questions to the members of the finance committee who are there. That would be probably a good segue into the budget presentation by Russ. And you're right, Barb, like we've done before, after our budget is approved, there will be a response to the recommendations as to what council didn't do, why we did it, why we didn't do it. And I think that's a good thing that we've done the last few years. So any final comments from anyone? Questions, anything? All right, well then.
Thank you.
Oh, Wallace.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank the members of the Citizen Finance Committee. They work hard, they care, and the concern that they have is expressed in the comments and the statements that they have in their report. One thing that has been a consistent theme is that the council doesn't make a very thorough comment on the reports that they make. And I don't see any reason why this body can't respond to everything that's in that citizen report. And I know there's some time involved in there, but those citizens took their time to come up with their suggestions, recommendations, or criticisms, whatever. And I think we owe them and the city, the residents of the city as a whole, an adequate response to those things. I think also one of the flaws that I see in the system that we utilize is that we never obligate the administration, the CAO, to address those issues either. So, it seems to me that it's somewhat backward that we get to a recommendation for our budget and we approve it. but we never really have any explanation of the construction of that budget by the CAO, and we never address the issue of options. So we rarely get options from the CAO, and that concerns me, because it, in some way, it eliminates the possibility of improvements. If you persist in what you've always done, then the results will always be what you've always done, and that concerns me. I think we really ought to have a hard conversation about how we go about our financial business.
All right. Now, one thing, Wallace, we do give a report to the Finance Committee, and after the last, several years, on the recommendations, what was adopted, what wasn't adopted. Here's why we didn't do that. So that is done.
Yeah, but there are certain items that we just overlook,
Oh.
and we've overlooked in the past, and we never give an explanation. And I'm just not pointing at this. I mean, that's been going on for decades. And in part, that's how we got in some of the capital problems that we have right now, is because we've ignored some things, and I think that's to the detriment of the community, and it puts the future in peril.
Well, thank you, Finance Committee, and we'll see some of you on at 4:30 next Thursday. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Next item we're going to discuss is the Geyer and Peak raised intersection. Russ, Bill? I'm not sure who's going with there. Chris?
I am here. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm having problems with my video and my microphone tonight. Laurie, can you go to the first slide that you have?
Yep, give me just 1 second to pull it up on the screen.
Okay. I'm just going to give a brief, basically a brief history of the Geyer Road project, okay, and where we are today with the Geyer Road project. While Laurie pulls that up, she's going to pull up the first drawing. Basically, Geyer Road was submitted, and this is an engineering drawing so I apologize for everybody. It's not an engineer, okay? But it's an engineering drawing of the Geyer and Peak and Doughty Ferry intersection. The city applied for a grant actually February 4th of 2016 for this project. And the goal of the project was just that at that time. The city had an absence of over 10 years of not applying for any type of grants. And this was the first one in that time period. And the goal focused on ADA improvement and mill and overlay improvement to the roadway. So that's where the focus was. So when we did this project and we got the grant, here is the Geyer Road intersection as it was designed. And basically you see it's just a mill and overlay with ADA improvements, and those were mostly handicap ramps. After some conversations a couple years later, as we start going through the Vision Zero things and complete streets, comments came in about this intersection. So we had, Laurie, if you can go to the next slide. So we had Alta, a local company, come and give us, the concept. What can we do to this intersection to improve pedestrian safety? And they came back with this concept, which is basically a raised intersection with bump outs and increased visibility of the crosswalks and the whole intersection itself, and some addition of some bicycle lanes, especially a right turn lane onto Doughty Ferry from southbound Geyer. So we took this, and last year the council approved to go back to the consultant and do a revision, and we had that revision now. Laurie, if you can go to the next one. Again, this is another engineering drawing. Very similar to the concept. It's still a raised intersection. It still has the bump outs. It still has the pedestrian enhancements. The only thing it does not have is that right turn lane onto Doughty Ferry. Before that could be done, we would want to do an intense traffic study, because that concept recommended going down to a single lane for both through movements, right turns, and left turns. And before we do that, we would want to do an in-depth traffic analysis. But in the interim, we could still provide this setup as the intersection is today. And if it's deemed to come back and look at that for a traffic study, we could do that at a later date. There'd be no major cost to drop that lane, okay? It can be done at a later time. So basically, went back through this. It has, like I said, the raised intersections, the ADA improvement, the pavement's going to be colored, and we set that out to our contractor, who we have under contract right now, to give us a cost for this, okay? And the cost came back. I will tell you, we got back their cost estimate, and their cost estimate was about $158,000 to make these improvements, okay? And so what we did, we took their cost estimate, and the engineering, the city engineering, assistant city engineer, went back and evaluated the Monroe intersection when we just raised that intersection. And that intersection cost $300,000 to do that. Some of that was due to utility conflicts that were unexpected, but overall the cost comparison from a bid project to a change order contract seemed fairly in place when they did their evaluation, okay? So to move forward on this, that's what we're here with the city council tonight. The total cost to do this, because we would have to do some additional inspection work. We have a contracted firm that is doing our inspection work to meet the STP requirements for testing of materials and things of that nature. That would be about another $20,000. So to do this project with a contingency, we were looking at $179,035 to move forward with this project. Talking to Sandy, if we wanted to move with the finance director, to move forward with this, we would have to appropriate funds into our cap from the, what I would call the fund balance. Sometimes she calls it something else. And we would have to transfer funds into this project account to move forward. At this city council's discretion, we're ready to move forward. We would probably have, hopefully, if we get approval, we would have contract amendments in front of the city council, hopefully for the first meeting in February, so we can be ready to start construction on this in March when the weather breaks, and then be in line to complete it and have the streets milled and overlaid and complete the project, hopefully by late April, early May. So that's where we are today. I can take any questions, or I can give any other information about it that you would like.
All right. All right, so we talked, Bill, so we talked about doing this, and what's that number you mentioned, 169 or something?
179.35.
Okay. And that is that, again, I might be confused, that's in addition to what we had already planned on spending? Is that?
Yes, that was not part of the original application. This is all an additional cost. There was some cost savings in the engineering analysis, but it's very minimal. It was only about $7,500 that we actually saved in other work that would not have to be performed on this.
So
very
this
minimal.
is, so yeah, this is, so the raised crosswalk, if I recall, was not part of the original plan.
Correct.
Okay, so this, all right, okay. Council questions. I'll go by hands first. Bob. Unmute yourself, Bob.
You mentioned that with the Monroe project, you ran into some unexpected utility issues that raised the costs. Have those been checked out here and included in your numbers?
That's what we had a contingency for, the 15%, okay? We did not do any subsurface evaluation, meaning go out there and actually dig up the lines to see exactly where they are. The one on Monroe was basically, I would say, a survey bust. by our engineering firm that had to come back out and redo the survey work for us to relocate some. It was a storm line and a gas line.
My second question was, with this improvement, what is the total cost of this intersection project, and how much of that is covered by grant money? You mentioned that this started with the grant application.
Right. It's, as far as grant money goes, we have our maximum amount of reimbursement, so we will be reimbursed up to that maximum amount. Okay. So I would say majority of this is probably not going to be covered because we have by the grant application, we have a set amount that we can be reimbursed to, and we would seek reimbursement up to the maximum. But that was based on our original scope. So this is well over our original scope.
So in adding the original scope and this together, what's the total?
Well, I'm going to ask Chris, because I'm going to say it's probably somewhere in a $1.3, $1.4 million range. Chris, do you know the exact total of the current contract?
Yeah, it's just over $1 million with the current contract. And so adding this amount to it would be right at 1.3.
Okay. And then what was the maximum grant figure that we're going to realize?
What we're getting reimbursed for, it's 80% of that cost of the original contract. So I don't have that exact figure. I can get that for you.
Okay. So I mean around 800,000 or something close to that?
Correct.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, well,
Yeah. First, Bill, let me thank you and Chris for taking an aggressive stance at trying to increase the safety of that intersection. It's a terrible intersection, and I know it's a difficult problem to overcome, but I thank you for taking the steps that you did there. That said, one time we talked about the potential of a roundabout up there. What happened with that idea?
The roundabout, we did that study about the roundabout. We could put a roundabout there, but we would have to severely encroach upon, we need additional right-of-way. The Smitties would have to basically come down, and then we would have to take property from the north, I guess that would be the northwest corner of the intersection, and then on the southwest corners of this intersection also. But when we did our TEEP study, we did a grant. We got a grant for that to do a TEEP study. It's feasible, but it had some heavy impacts, and we had at that time, some people may remember, quite some residents dislike of the project, and so it never moved forward after that process. And we did three intersections at that time, and was the Geyer one, and then the Craig one, and then we did a TEEP study also on the Old Big Bend and Craig intersection. So it was never moved forward.
Okay, just for future reference though, which of the two options is the best overall from an engineering standpoint?
Well, it's good. Okay, for traffic engineering, a roundabout is better. Okay, but traffic for roundabouts and pedestrians and bicycle, not as good as what this option would be. This is more pedestrian orientated and safety enhanced. It's not set up for good traffic movements. Okay, it's more pedestrian focused.
Okay, good. Well, that's certainly a higher priority for us than traffic flow. Thanks.
all right, good. Any other, Liz?
I just wanted to understand what you're proposing would eliminate a right turn from Doherty Ferry onto Guyer going east. Am I correct?
For the bicycle lane or for the traffic lane?
For the traffic lane.
The traffic lane would eliminate the northbound right turn or northbound left turn onto Guyer Road.
The northbound.
Left turn onto Guyer.
I mean,
So
Doherty
if you're
Ferry?
eastbound on Doherty
Yeah.
Ferry, you can't take a left.
Yeah.
You could, well, you could take a left, but we're eliminating that. In the original concept, that was eliminated. Taking those two lanes and making it one lane, where you would do your through movement, straight, right, and left, all in that one lane. Right now, you can take your straight and your right in one lane, and your left turn in one lane. With a traffic study would probably show that would get during certain peak hours, that would create a huge backup on that eastbound lane of Doherty Ferry.
Yeah, that I was concerned about the high school letting out.
Correct. And if we would move with that, I would definitely say we don't have time to do the traffic study now, but if it was really wanted, we could do it later and make the modifications if the traffic study come out to prove something else.
So there will, under this scenario, Bill, I'm a little confused too. There would be no left turn onto Guyer from eastbound Doherty Ferry. Is that what you're saying?
No, on our concept that we have in front of you would allow the left turn.
Okay. There would be no turn restrictions there then at that intersection.
Correct. It would
Okay.
function as it does today.
Okay. All right. With the raised crosswalk.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Raised intersection.
Or intersection, right? Right. Liz, anything else right now?
No.
Anyone else? Maggie?
Just to be, I'm a little confused on the money part. So the total with the old and the proposed is 1.3 million. And we could possibly get a grant for 800,000 of that?
No, we already
No.
got our grant. Our grant amount is set. We cannot get another grant.
Okay, so the 1.3 million is over the 800,000.
Now, this would be an additional 179 that would have to come out of our pocket, which would make the total project, I think Chris said, around 1.3.
Correct.
We would have to fund this 179 ourselves with no grant.
Okay, but not the 1.3.
No, that's
That is the grant.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Okay. Any other hands? Mark, Kara? Mark?
Just ask one question, because this is a very large area to have a raised intersection, just because it's kind of skewed. Is there anything we could do to reduce the cost of this 179 by just raising the crosswalks and not the entire intersection? Is there going to have to be any changes done to the work that has been done over the past 6 months to Guyer Road?
There would be no changes that would have to be done to the work that's been completed, but we would have to redesign this, and we don't have time to redesign it right now, because the cost of it would probably go up also, because when you raise that intersection and you just raise the crosswalks, what you've created is a swimming pool for water. Okay, so we'd have to do some extensive stormwater improvements to clear the intersection of water. Okay, with this raised intersection we've minimized, we still have an impact on stormwater that we have to handle, but we minimize that cost because we're going to allow it to sheet flow into the existing stormwater system, and we just have to make some minor improvements to that. But by just putting raised intersections, we've created basically a dam around that intersection that would hold water, and then we would have to make stormwater improvements.
I'll also add that raised crosswalks are not appropriate at intersections. That's why they aren't, that's part of the reason why they aren't done. Raised crosswalks are typically mid-block. That's FHA guidelines and so forth. That's where you see raised crosswalks. You don't see them at intersections because they're confusing for drivers as well.
One of the things that we did do to reduce the cost is that the middle area that's all red, let's say in that one photograph, that is going to be asphalt. That is not going to be concrete because that drove the cost up. The Monroe one is all concrete, but the big open field is going to be put back as asphalt. The only concrete is the bump outs and the ramp ups on this one to reduce the cost.
Thank you, Bill.
Karen, do you have anything?
I guess I don't have any questions, but I guess I just want to put my 2 cents in is, you know, this intersection touches a lot of kids walking to the high school, Kaiser, in the middle school. You have a lot of bicyclists that come down there on the weekends and the mornings. And I think I originally approached Russ and Bill about this about 1.5 years ago because there was a really close call with one of the cross guards there as children were walking across that intersection. So I know it's a steep price, but I think given the use of that and the safety of who uses that, it's worth the extra money to go all out with all of these safety enhancements. And that's just my 2 cents.
All right. So Russ, Liz?
So this was something that came kind of after the fact, after we applied for the grant, then it came up that we needed to make these enhancements to this intersection. Am I getting that correct?
Yes, it wasn't a needed thing, but it was a recommendation based on as we move forward since 2016, we've moved way forward in pedestrian enhancements and things of that nature. And this came in about the second year after the application, and we moved forward at the council's direction to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Kara. I mean, this is one of the not oddest intersections in town. It's just dangerous, and with the 3 schools, I think it's important we move forward. Russ, now how would we, in terms of financing, it would require obviously an ordinance from council, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's going to be a new appropriation of funding, and we can draft that up for you to make that happen.
All right. Is there any? I think we ought to go ahead and have you draft it up, and we can consider it at our next council meeting.
Okay. No problem.
All right.
Staff supports it fully.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anything else from council on this? All right. Well, with that, our business and the work session is done. We asked everyone to just turn right around and log in for our regular meeting. So see everybody in a couple minutes. a broken record, City Attorney Hess, I'm going to ask you to make a statement regarding the Sunshine Law and meeting remotely.
I will, Mayor. As the special announcement of the meeting reflects, Section 610.015 of the Missouri Sunshine Law provides that members of the City Council who are not physically present in the council chambers can participate and vote on all matters when an emergency exists, and the nature of the emergency must be stated in the minutes. So once again, we would ask the minutes to reflect that due to the pandemic COVID-19, that the City Council is meeting remotely for their own safety as well as the public safety.
Thank you, John. We have no public hearings, introductions, presentations. We'll go straight to public comments.
The public comments portion of the meeting is an opportunity for the City Council to listen to comments from citizens. It is not a question and answer session, and the City Council will not respond to comments or answer questions during this period. The mayor may refer any matter brought up to the City Council to the Chief Administrative Officer or City Clerk if action is needed. If anyone wishes to make a public comment, if you would please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Laurie. Freddie, do we have anyone wishing to speak?
One hand raised. And
all right.
Hardy Muniz.
Am I on board?
Yes, Hardy, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief and I won't repeat myself from last time. I have been getting a significant amount of contact that apparently has been generated through word of mouth about this project and about the resolution that's on the docket tonight. A letter appeared tonight, delivered tonight in the Kirkwood Webster Times, which reiterates my position, which is gaining popularity around town. It seems to me that you have something that was voted against by the subcommittee of P&Z, passed P&Z by one vote, and is now set quickly for a double vote tonight for a resolution to amend the framework plan and then the approval of the site plan. I believe, based on the phone calls and other contact that I've gotten in the last several days, that there will be even more contact after this letter is read. And so I believe that the council should table or continue its vote for further dialogue. This is a very close issue coming out of P&Z, and it seems like the city is perilously moving toward a vote that hasn't really been vetted citywide. The notion that the plan is to be changed by resolution will be difficult for people to understand if perhaps they read this letter and then one call me tomorrow and wonder, and I have to tell them, well, it was voted on last night. I'm sorry. And if it was, if it's voted for, then it's over perhaps. So I think you should slow this down and see. It's 3 condo units. It's not that big a deal, but there seems to be some type of rush here. So I would suggest the council move, continue the matter or table it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Freddie?
There are no more hands.
All right, thank you. All right, we will then move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. All right, we go to unfinished business, Bill 10862.
Mayor and Council, this is an ordinance amending the Kirkwood Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Section 14-403, no right turn on red, to add the intersection of North Taylor Avenue and Quan Avenue and the intersection of Quan Avenue and Woodlawn.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Griffin,
Yes.
Councilmember Zimmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Yes.
Councilmember Wertz,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibbons,
Yes.
Councilmember Sears,
Yes.
Councilmember Dewey.
Yes.
All right, bill passes. Move to new business, resolution 4, 2021.
Mayor and Council, this is a resolution amending Resolution 71-2019 by revising the framework plan portion of the downtown master plan and parking study for the city of Kirkwood.
Is there a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll just make a quick comment first and then other council. I mean, amending the framework plan like this is well within council authority. We've amended it a couple times with resolution, which is how it's done. And my thought, and one thing we have to keep in mind, this resolution is separate from the next one for the site plan. Now, if this one does not pass, the site plan cannot move forward, but this just has to deal with what areas are mandatory commercial. And as council knows, we've looked at that in the past, realizing that not every location in downtown Kirkwood either needs to be or should be commercial, commercial being either business or including mixed use with first floor business retail use and above floors residential. So I think the question for this is this, is this location one that the council wants to see as remain as commercial, or if we're open to amending the plan for residential? My thought is, again, that not every place in downtown Kirkwood is for commercial. It's a relatively small site. It's across from a church, actually church playground, catty corner to another church. And this is one spot that I think is okay not to be mandatory commercial. So I will be voting in favor of this resolution. So other council questions or comments? Councilmember Zimmer, anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I concur that because of the size of the site, making it mandatory commercial is in conflict with trying to approve a commercial development on this small of a site. And I would actually like to see us do a review of all of the sites in our commercial district to see what other sites might fall into this category where, based on our current rules and our zoning laws for commercial development, we couldn't pass it because it's too small. So I would like to continue and do an overall approach so that we have it correct and we have it prudent based on our current laws, that if you have a site that's too small to approve as commercial, that we can change that and we don't have to do this every time. So so I would like to see that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councilmember Ward.
I'd have a question for John regarding the comments that Councilmember Zimmer just made. John, where does that stand in terms of legalities?
Not sure what you're asking, Wallace. I apologize. Help me.
Well, he was proposing that we examine all of the commercial sites and current commercial sites in downtown Kirkwood, and then consider which of those we could now summarily eliminate from that restriction.
Well, I think there's two separate issues. One was more for Jonathan Raish to examine from a city planning standpoint whether or not the properties are continue to be developable as commercial. I think your question is a very valid one, and that is that the city is limited in unilaterally rezoning properties. In fact, to the best of my knowledge, I can't think of any instance where the city has rezoned properties without an application of the property owners or in some other fashion. So you always have to be careful about engaging in a rezoning that's going to impact the current properties. Again, I think it's if I understood what Mark was saying, he really is talking about doing an analysis to determine whether or not we have commercial sites that, because of our parking requirements, would not allow for further development within those
That's
commercial
correct.
sites and how we should address those.
Correct.
I think that's what I heard. So in that
Yes.
regard, I don't have a real legal problem with doing that analysis. Your point, Wallace, is okay, what do we do? What's the next step after we do that analysis? Very good question. We'd have to talk about that further.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Russ or Jonathan, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing that I would add is when in a framework plan, it identifies commercial versus residential or non-commercial. Let me put it that way. I won't even get into residential, but just commercial versus non-commercial use in a specific area. It's not by size of lot necessarily. So in other words, a developer could combine lots and make a commercial. So when we say that it's undevelopable as commercial, in this case, the one we're looking at right now is pretty reasonably difficult to develop as commercial. But when we look at the framework outlines for Jefferson or so forth, where you have a parking lot or you have some tight properties across, I'm thinking of East Jefferson specifically, where the city's been approached previously about some property that the city owns and combining that with next door property and so forth. Those are ways to get to commercial where otherwise you couldn't necessarily. It's just something to keep in mind.
Jonathan, did you have anything to add? You don't have to.
Just briefly, I guess I think what Councilmember Zimmer, I agree as to the need or maybe the idea that we should take a broader look as well. So if you recall or remember from the memo related to this this item on the agenda, this recommendation is one of a few that were made by one of our consultant firms, right? So in my memo, I mentioned, and I would recommend that in the near future, that we take a look at. I think it would take a different approach or some more discussion, but look at the rest of their recommendations. They made recommendations almost 1 year ago, but again, things have been, the past year has been a little busy. So, but I think it is certainly a good idea to take a look at those recommendations, the other recommendations they made, and any others that council may want to do. So,
all right, thank you. Councilmember Wertz?
I have nothing.
Okay. Councilmember Gibbons?
I have a couple of things. The fact that this is on the very edge end of what's considered commercial, I just don't have a problem with that. And this property was a home at one time, along with the other properties to the south of it. And given what's going on now with what started with COVID, but I believe it's going to continue, where commercial and retail space is not going to be used like it has been in the past. I think more people will be working from home and what have you. So I don't have a problem with this. That's all.
Councilmember Sears?
I have no question or comment.
All right. Councilmember Dewey?
I have no question or comment.
All right. Well, with that, seeing no more questions or comments from council, let's have roll call, please.
Mayor Griffin,
Yes.
Councilmember Zimmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Yes.
Councilmember Wertz,
You're muted.
Oh.
Yes.
Councilmember Gibbons,
Yes.
Councilmember Sears,
Yes.
Councilmember Dewey.
Yes.
Resolution passes. Now we move on to Resolution 5, 2021.
Mayor and Council, this is a resolution approving the site plan for the property known as 144 West Adams Avenue, subject to certain conditions.
Is there a motion for approval?
Move
So
approval.
moved.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Again, I will just briefly state, following up comments I made before. In terms of this particular site plan, I know some have concern with the height. But as I look around at some of the information that Kara requested regarding heights and of surrounding properties, I think this would be a really, really nice addition to that corner of downtown. The height really has to do just with the elevator, but looking up and seeing, this very nice, I'll call it in-house rooftop space, I think would be a very, 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 very good thing. 3 condos adding, people downtown who can use our existing, who will use and spend money in our existing retail spaces and restaurants. And I agree with what Councilmember Gibbons said about the future and commercial businesses. I mean, I think there are definitely places where we need to have, we should have retail space, restaurants, commercial, but at the same time, as that probably reduces, we want to make sure we have people downtown who can frequent our existing establishments. I think that's very, very important. And I think even though this is just a small 3-unit building, it will add people downtown to do that. So I will be voting yes on the resolution. Councilmember Zimmer.
As I've said before, I really like the building. I like the architecture and the design. I still have concern with the height. If it didn't have the rooftop porch on it, I'd be in full support, but I still have concerns about the height. Thank you.
Councilmember Ward.
Well, I would agree with your comments, Mayor. When you look at surrounding buildings, I think we had 62 feet on the old Bell Telephone building. Folks have not run past there screaming in horror for my entire lifetime. That building's been there a long time, and height wasn't a problem when it was put up, and it hasn't persisted as a problem over these many decades. So I think this building is a compatible use at that intersection. I think architecturally, of course, it's an attractive building too. So I see no reason to oppose that development.
Thank you. Councilmember Wertz.
I've gone back and forth on this one because the height to me is a bit of an issue. The school across the street's 40 feet. Most of them, except for the, AT&T and the church caddy corner are kind of the outliers. So that was giving me concern because all of a sudden you're going to have some shadow, some, coverage over this. But reading through it again, the majority of the roof is going to be that 38 feet. Is that correct, Jonathan?
That's correct.
Okay. So to me, then that mass then kind of shrinks a bit when you're looking at the height, which kind of alleviates some of my concern. And then going through some of the additions we're getting as a city, the drainage kind of new thing that you're going to be putting in is going to help, I think, mitigate a lot of problems we're having in that area as it comes to storm drainage. And I think to me, that kind of balanced out some of my concerns. So those are just my comments, and thanks for clarifying the height, Jonathan.
Councilmember Gibbons.
I absolutely love the look of this building, and there's a lot of things that are being built around here these days that I'm not as fond of, but this building is gorgeous. But I have a real concern with the height. I don't know. I feel like there's other ways that they could achieve what they're doing without having to be as high as it is. That's all.
Okay. Councilmember Sears.
I think if the true height of the building were what we have to count when we're looking at this, we're where it was. When I say true height, I mean, by technical rule, we have to count where the top of the elevator shaft is, or where the top of that canopy roof is. And I think we just need to be more observant than that. The actual height, the observable height of the building, the height that it's going to feel to passersby, is within our limits. And so I think people are going to look up, they're going to see the top of the building as regulation height. They're going to see that there's a rooftop deck or patio, whatever you want to call it, with a shelter over it. And they're going to think that it's recessed from the face of the building. And people are going to say, that's a really nice, I was going to say swell. Am I that old? It's a really great amenity for a building in that area, and they're going to appreciate it for what it is. So I'm not bothered. I mean, I am bothered by heights of buildings when they go too far, but when it's something like this where it's set back, diminished in scale, and where I don't feel like from the drawings and from visualizing what was described, I don't feel like it's going to be something that's going to feel like it's that height, which is really what we need to be concerned about. What does the bulk of the building, what's the experience for the person on the street?
Thank you. Councilmember Dewey.
I, like several others, have gone back and forth and written out all sorts of lists and pros and cons, and it comes down to an issue with the height. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other council comments or questions on this? All right, I'm seeing none. Roll call, please.
Mayor Griffin,
Yes.
Councilmember Zimmer,
No.
Councilmember Ward,
Yes.
Councilmember Wertz,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibbons,
No.
Councilmember Sears,
Yes.
Councilmember Dewey.
Yes.
All right, resolution passes. We go on to resolution, let me get my agenda, I apologize. Resolution 7, 2021.
Mayor and Council, this is a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor to enter into an agreement for police, emergency medical service, and fire dispatching services with the city of De Pere for a term beginning April 1, 2021 through March 31, 2026.
Is there a motion for approval?
Motion.
Move approval.
We've got a motion and a second. Again, as we have done a lot lately as the city, we've expanded our cooperation with other municipalities now by taking on De Pere's police dispatching in addition to their fire and EMS. Just another way, not just for revenue, but to share services with communities around us, which is something I think all of us in the area think is a good thing. And I'm very happy, Russ, you and the chiefs who worked on this. We appreciate that, and it's going to be a good thing for Kirkwood and for De Pere. Other council comments or questions on this? Councilmember Zimmer?
I think this is, we just had our work session, and this is such a great path forward for the city of Kirkwood, as well as the city of De Pere. It's a win for everybody. So thanks to the staff and everybody that put in the time and effort to make this happen, as well as other agreements we've made. this is exactly what we need to be doing. So thank you.
Yeah. Any other council comments, questions? Councilmember Ward.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with you and Councilmember Zimmer. I think that this is a sign of strength for the area. I think for too long, the 91 municipalities in St. Louis County have been siloed, and I think to their own detriment. So the more partnerships we can agree to, the stronger we will be as a county.
All right. Anything else from council? Councilmember Sears.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Wallace said and point out that back when the city-county merger was a big concern for everybody, there were good points that came out of that, and one of the things was the duplication of expenses related to administration of so many different small municipalities. And we discussed at the time our options and things. And one of the things we thought of way back then was that kind of an organic way to get to a better position would be for communities to start cooperating more. And I think that's we've kind of engaged in that from that time forward, and that's what's got us here, and hopefully will carry us, and then as by example, other communities in the region can avoid some of these duplications that we have. So I feel very strongly about it. I think it's been purposeful on our part since back then to try to reach this point, and there's more that can be done.
Thank you. Any other council comments, questions? All right. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Griffin,
Yes.
Councilmember Zimmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Yes.
Councilmember Wertz,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibbons,
Yes.
Councilmember Sears,
Yes.
Councilmember Dewey.
Yes.
Resolution passes. City council reports. Anyone have anything that he or she wishes to report? All right. Chief Administrative Officer report.
No, I have no report right now, Mayor.
All right. City Attorney report.
I have nothing to report, Mayor.
City Clerk report.
We have no scheduled upcoming public hearings. Well, I'm sorry, we will be scheduling an upcoming public hearing in February for the budget. We don't have a date set to that as of yet, but I will report that as soon as we do. But as of right now, we don't have any scheduled public hearings.
All right, very good. So with that, our business is done. The next meeting of City Council is 2 weeks from now, February 4th, 7 p.m. Via Zoom. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.